Welcome back to Newsday. Thank you for staying with us. Now, in the wake of the scrapping of the fuel subsidy and the ensuing chaos, scarcity, and now the high cost of petrol, a number of state governments have embarked on the reduction of working days for their workers. Kwara and Edo states, they both set the ball rolling, and as the situation continues to unfold, it'll be little or no surprise to see other states acting in a like manner, ostensibly as a way to offer relief to their workforce. Well, we have Arise analyst Frank Tietie joining us now for a conversation on the possible impact of this arrangement on the state's economies. He's also going to be looking at how best to cushion the effect of the new petrol regime on workers' welfare. Good to have you join us this afternoon on Newsday. Thanks for joining us, Frank.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Obviously, with the states taking their workers into account and reducing the work hours for individuals to physically show up at their work offices, and of course, all the other fallouts we have been hearing ever since the taking off the fuel subsidy, what, in your opinion, could be the fallout other than clearly the economic impact it could have?
Well, this is not the first time governments across the Federation will be faced with a very serious situation that is challenging productivity and its government's ability to provide services to the people. We had the worst of times during the COVID-19 pandemic, where government services largely were shut down. And civil servants of a certain category, particularly level 14 below for the federal government, did not have to show up to work. And the government services didn't end. The country didn't shut down. So it's commendable that certain state governments are now being innovative. But clearly, what is beginning to become very clear is that we have an over-bloated public service in general, particularly civil servants that are occupying positions in the state. They can work, in various forms without physically showing up in the physical office space. So it's important that the economy may not be affected much by the cessation of these certain services of government, particularly those of civil servants. However, there is no doubt that the high cost of living that will follow as a result of the removal of subsidy will affect private businesses more than it will affect public service in general.
Well, Mr. Tietie, I'm wondering actually, if the state governments have actually invested enough in technology to actually tell their, civil servants to work from home.
Oh, well, before they even work from home, we've seen. The point I have struggled to make is that many of those civil servants are not needed in the state's civil service. For example, first and foremost, again, given the digital economy policy of the previous administration, by now, expectedly, we should be running an e-government approach in a practice, I would say, in Nigeria. One would have expected, you talk about investments in information technology. The idea of e-governance is that there will be enough acquisition of information about the people and the services that government is supposed to render to the people. Now, unfortunately, we are stuck with the manual ways of doing things, employing so many people to run a civil service because it is a cheap way of spreading state resources so that it can touch others. The investments actually are supposed to be in gathering the information, and I think we haven't done that. But when it comes to infrastructure, private enterprises have provided that infrastructure, especially in the provision of the internet. The government hasn't done much in that regard. So internet availability in this country has been done much by the private sector, and internet penetration has been quite deep enough to actually support an e-governance structure in this country. And to that extent, we shouldn't be talking about reduction of work hours. We may have to take the bitter pill of right-sizing the number of staff that are in the various state civil service.
Adjusting the redundancy. Actually, you would think that since in a post-COVID era, these are some of the thoughts that the government would have had, how to, kind of make sure that individuals don't have to come into contact with each other too much, and how that trickles down into the workplace. But obviously that we're in a post-pandemic era, and that has taken the back burner. But we do know that a lot of governments have, Edo State in particular, have come up with creative ideas to cushion the effect for their citizens. This one is with the increase of the minimum wage and the reduction of the work hours, which we talked about. What what kind of ideas do you think, creative ideas, do you think that the governments can come up with in order to cushion the effect for citizens?
Apart from right-sizing, we need a realistic minimum wage. They talk about adding 10 or 15,000 naira to the current minimum wage is, with much respect, ridiculous. When you have a sort of over 500% increase in the price of basic goods and services, the expectation is that those who are in the employment of government should have a commensurate and reasonable increase in their salaries. Now, but when it comes to those who are not employed by government, I've made the case that government should reduce the number of those, not redundant, needless number of persons who work for it. But for the ordinary citizen, there's this much talk about palliatives. But I do believe that when we have a robust economy that creates, especially the one that allows individual enterprise to thrive, a situation where persons who have things to offer, and then we have a legal environment that has a large degree of certainty, and then with some measure of law enforcement that can guarantee some safety and some peace, I think Nigerians are industrious enough. Many of the persons you are talking about who work for the state governments, who work for the various civil services across the country, ought to be businessmen, ought to be farm owners, ought to be somewhere working in the manufacturing sector. But they are not there now because they prefer the security of a government employment. And it's actually impacting on the economy, which means that there is a high level of underproduction, lack of productivity because of the persons who are shying away from the real sector. Now, in that regard, all that government needs to do is to continually create an enabling environment for persons to maximize their potentials. And I can assure you, irrespective of the reality, which is welcome, there's a very much welcome development that subsidies are removed so that we can have much more capital investment, especially in the areas of security and provision of infrastructure that will support government services. If you look at the services that these government officials provide, they are more in the area of licensing, approvals, and keeping to standards. Many of them don't require much of physical presence. Rather, there's communication with the right kind of information and the ingredients that will support the productivity in general. So reduce the number of staff, and then again, create the enabling environment and see the wonders that Nigeria will do. The Nigerians will do the same way they've done in other places, like especially in stable economies in the West. Nigerians are thriving very well, whether in business or in the professions. You will see the same being replicated in no distant and a very short time, I would say. So I think it's up to government delivering on its fundamental services of security and welfare for the people, and that's all.
Well, but I'm wondering if increasing the minimum wage can help in the long term, when we consider the rapid inflation that we are experiencing in Nigeria, coupled with the fact that even the recently removed subsidy already, has led to a hike in prices.
Removal of subsidies will help us greatly, especially in first of all, plugging this unending cycle of corruption and then again, the very unreasonable, approach of subsidizing a product that is actually not being used by Nigerians. I don't want to go into that. But again, we're talking about realistic minimum wage for the people who actually work and deserve the value of what they get. We're not talking about minimum wage minimum wage that, must everybody be employed by the government? So if the government employs a number of persons and they do the work, they should be expected to have a reasonable minimum wage. I'm not fixing the price. The wage has been suggested by DUC and the Labour Coalition of a minimum of 200,000 naira. It has to be realistic to the extent that when you see an economy that is suffering from inflation, yes, then you cannot now expect those who have fixed salaries to not to be having something that is reasonable. In that case, you are actually driving them to something else, which is likely corruption. However, for those who are in the manufacturing sector, for those who are in the agriculture, who are in the real sector, I would say, should be able to match their services, their products, along with the forces of demand and supply in the economy. And ultimately, things will stabilize. But at the moment, there must, beyond palliatives, we must have a reasonable number of persons. You talk about state governments that have bloated civil servants. We have that number reduced. And then we want to see a situation where money saved from the removal of subsidy is quickly translated into helping small businesses to grow and creating an environment, an economic environment, a legal environment that will enable Nigerians do their thing. That is what they are known for, being highly industrious and productive people. It's just a matter of time. We will overcome the situation. State governments should just take exercise enough courage, just the same way the president has done by mentioning the mention of removal of subsidies. State governments should say it as it is, that they don't need this large number of unnecessary, needless number of persons who run and man their civil services. It's not, we are talking about, those in the public service, particularly in law enforcement, the army and the armed forces and the police. We don't have enough of them. But again, consider that you need to know the staggering number of persons who man the state civil services. That is not necessary. They should take the hard part of cutting down the number of those that are employed in the civil service that are largely unproductive to the economy.
Redundancy. And so the question now is, what is the feasible way forward? Because just as you mentioned, we're known as a resilient type of people. It's a very much just manage it as you go. Life continues. Let's just adjust and just manage with it. What, in your opinion, is the feasible way forward?
Let me please emphasize this. No. It's not just for us to get by, not just for us to manage. We're saying that with the right kind of environment to which government is responsible to provide, Nigerians would display that exceptional ability to be so industrious and productive. And that's what government should first of all take to account. When you say the way forward, we're not saying that. Let's get this clear. It is not in the reduction of the number of hours. It is first and foremost, like I've said, the application, the adoption, the greater penetration of e-governance models at the local government level and at the state government level, and is expected at the federal government. It will not only increase transparency and openness of government, it will reduce corruption and then increase productivity and service
increase efficiency to the people. And it's all about information. If we haven't done it during the COVID years, this is the time to gather information about the people that government serves. It's time to make open what the services are. Now, you will reduce the incidences of bribery and corruption, payments for quick services just because some persons are staggering, and slowing down the process of approvals and licensing, which are the essential services government render to the people, because it's about regulation of standards. Give Nigerians an enabling environment, give them safety, give them peace, give them some measure of certainty with regards to standards, and the sky will be our starting point when it comes to productivity. Let Nigerians be able to go to farms. Let those who are in the real sector be prevented from unnecessary multiple taxation. Let them be protected from hawks in government who use such the opportunities in government to oppress or to exploit. And then let us just have an economy that is based on the book and that is correct and that is predictable. And then it's just a matter of time. The adjustment of the removal, with regards to the removal of subsidy, is a matter of time. We will get it right, but we must have a solid, stable foundation upon which we must build our economy, and that is the certainty of allowing law to prevail. And again, that will help greater foreign direct investment, which is needed badly to drive the provision of employment for the teeming number of youths that are currently unemployed.
Okay, now we've been talking about the civil servants, and you've also talked about what government can do, to help cushion the impact, of this all subsidy removal. But I'm wondering, what about the artisans? What about those who depend on this fuel, for a living? For instance, the Uber drivers, the taxi drivers. Is there any immediate palliative that can be given to them? See, the kind of free market economy we run in this country should take away the sense of palliatives. For a long time, we've neglected an aspect of our economy in terms of services that actually determine the quality and standard of life that we ought to have as a country. And that's a group of persons you just mentioned, the artisans, those who provide, the carpenters, the mechanics, the plumbers, and the rest of them. These persons provide services that are highly undervalued because they are not regulated. I'm not talking about unnecessary unionism, but I'm talking about proper licensing, proper approvals, proper determination of standards. We haven't had them. Now is the time, so that you don't begin, when you say you're an artisan, you must get the proper training, not just sitting by the roadside or standing under the bridge to say, look, I'm needing a job, and I am this and that, and then you go do a poor job. I have seen in this country where tilers are imported from Togo to come and do tiles. What kind of thing is that? It means that those who really want quality service in this country know that we don't have proper artisans. So this is the time to set the standards for persons who claim to be artisans to now be regulated, registered, and then in that case they can be properly remunerated. It is not about giving them palliatives or necessarily increasing their salaries. If they are in the labor market, their services are constantly in need because we have a burgeoning construction industry in this country. So it's about standards. Government needs to wake up and set the standards, and then you see a whole lot of industries growing as a result of persons who are now acquiring skills that are standardized according to government regulations.
Well, Frank Tietie, it's always great to have you discussing with us whatever the topic may be. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.